Grace and peace, and welcome to another episode of Your Week with St. Luke's, our weekly podcast at St. Luke's United Methodist Church. It's our hope that these podcasts will be an opportunity to take a deeper dive into the text for the week ahead as we all seek to learn, live, love, and lead our lives with more purpose. And all doing so with the grace and love of Jesus Christ. My name is Jad Denmark. I'm one of the pastors at St. Luke's, and we are so excited about this year in front of us, this year-long theme of being purposeful people. We have a new vision from God, and we're looking at how to live into it with purpose, with intention. And so we are in a sermon series, Life on Purpose, Lessons from Lasso. And last week was Life on Purpose. The lesson was a relational life. And we looked at how Jesus sought to be in relationship with people in his ministry, and that we're called to be in relationship too. Last week, the second week, was a life on purpose is being curious. And so the lesson from Lasso was be curious, not judgmental. And we looked at how Jesus calls us to do the same, to be curious people and not judgmental people. And that was encapsulated in the Zacchaeus story in Luke. Well, this week, our lesson is Life on Purpose is a Forgiving Life. And our scriptural text is from the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to John, chapter 21, verse 15 through 19. And I'm going to read this for us from the Common English Bible translation. When they finished eating, Jesus asked, Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Simon replied, Yes, Lord, I love you. And Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. Jesus asked a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon replied, Yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said to him, Take care of my sheep. He asked a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time, Do you love me? And he replied, Lord, you know everything. You know I love you. And Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. I assure you that when you were younger, you tied your own belt and walked around wherever you wanted. When you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will tie your belt and lead you where you don't want to go. He said this to show the kind of death that Peter would glorify God, which Peter would glorify God. After saying this, Jesus said to Peter, Follow me. Well, a few things about the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to John, which is a more accurate name for this gospel that we call John. Actually, scholars call this the fourth gospel because it has evidence within it that dates it to being the latest of the four gospels. And because the other three gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, are called the synoptic gospels. That is, they are seen, optic, together, syn. S-Y-N means together, like synergy and synagogue, together. Seen, optic, synoptic gospels. Well, John isn't seen together with those other three gospels. John, the fourth gospel, is quite different than the other three, and there is little to no shared material, which is an absolutely beautiful thing that we have four different perspectives, four different voices, four different audiences, four different groups of people, four different authors speaking to, writing about the person of Jesus. Well, here in chapter 21, we have the final discourse of Jesus. Chapter 21 is the last chapter of John. In chapter 19, Jesus is sentenced, crucified, dies, and is buried. In chapter 20 of John, Jesus is resurrected. He appears to Mary of Magdalene and then to the disciples. And then lastly, in chapter 20, Jesus appears again to the disciples, but this time with Thomas in the room. And so here in chapter 21, it begins with Jesus' appearance to 7 disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, where all of these disciples have gone back to their day jobs. They're fishermen once again with the smelly fish on the boats and the nets. And in this moment, Jesus appears on the shoreline while they are fishing. And they join him on the shore and they have breakfast together. They cook up some fish. And now, in our text, chapter 15 through 19, Jesus, the risen Lord, has this conversation with Peter. Dr. Gail O'Day, who was one of my professors in seminary, she's a Johannine scholar, an expert on the Gospel of John and the literature of the Johannine group. She notes that these verses focus on Peter himself. And the last verses, 20 and 24, focus on the beloved disciples, as it's called, the beloved disciple throughout John. But here, the central character is Peter. Jesus is focused in on Peter. The way the language works, the emphasis is on Peter. In these verses that's focused on Peter, we have this threefold pattern of the conversation between Peter and Jesus that seem to correspond or have a counterbalance to Peter's 3 denials of Jesus that Jesus predicted in John chapter 13. And as it happens and unfolds, it is narrated to us in John chapter 18. Maybe Peter needs to hear Jesus commission him all 3 times. Maybe he needs that to absolve. Maybe he needs that to fully accept the forgiveness of Jesus so that he can accept fully this commissioning of Jesus or from Jesus. Here, in our text, Peter is now able to move beyond his previous relationship with Jesus and claim the intimacy, the unity, the mutuality with God and Jesus that was promised to the believers in Jesus' farewell discourse in the previous chapter. It seems like maybe Peter wasn't able to fully accept it then, but now he's able to fully receive that intimacy, that unity, and that mutuality with God that Jesus promises. This threefold pattern has 3 pieces within it, each happening 3 times. The first is Jesus questioning Peter's love. The second is Peter's affirmation of his love. And the third piece in the threefold pattern is Jesus' charge to feed and care for his sheep. It's important to note that these verses don't necessarily point to Peter, as Jesus' distinctive successor, but uses Peter as the embodiment of what is true for all of Jesus' disciples. Feed my sheep. They don't become Peter's sheep. They're still Jesus's sheep. It's still Jesus's mission. It's still what Jesus is longing to do. And now we pick it up and continue the work of Jesus. Peter is the model of what it means to live out our love for Jesus. The heart of verse 15 through 17 seems to lie in the relationship between Peter's love for Jesus and the charge to feed Jesus' sheep. When Jesus does this, he's translating Peter's love for him into this charge: feed my sheep, tend my sheep, care for my sheep. And Jesus is reminding Peter of his words in chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, where he says, just as I have loved you, you also love one another. You should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. See, in this charge to Peter, Jesus is reminding all of us to keep that command, to put Peter's love, to put our love for Jesus into practice by feeding, tending Jesus' sheep. Just like Jesus is actualizing his love, his grace, and forgiveness towards Peter in coming to him in this threefold manner, Jesus is putting his love into practice. So should Peter. We should too. John has lots of details and callbacks. As you're reading this verse and you're familiarizing yourself with John, I wonder what callbacks or connections in John do you recognize? What are the greater themes that Jesus is pointing to in these verses? What does this text say about the nature of Jesus' forgiveness? And what does it mean for you and how you forgive? Well, I pray that as you read this text and you have conversations with your life together groups, with your Bible study groups, with your family together, you think about this lesson that Jesus is embodying for us, this lesson of forgiveness. And I pray you'll join us this coming Sunday as we seek to learn this lesson from Lasso and this lesson from Jesus about a purposeful life is one of forgiveness. Grace and peace, beloved.